My name is Bill Hillsman. I do advertising. I do political ads. I brought some because most people would rather watch them than hear me talk and maybe hear some of the stories behind them. I didn't prepare anything because I was at the Apple store all afternoon. Although I can answer a lot of questions about the new Apple interface if anybody's got questions about that. So I'd like to do this mostly as a question-answer thing, and I found in the past when I speak that if it's more of a question-answer thing, then I know I'm talking about at least something one person in the audience is actually interested in hearing about. So how do you want to start? Do you want to do some questions and answers or interview or what?
Let's just roll a commercial or two.
Okay.
And go from there.
What do you want to see? And we didn't just do the things that were recited. We did the launch of Air America Radio, which kind of got us Al Franken. We did Ned Lamont's upset victory over Joe Lieberman in the primary, Connecticut in 2006. We did Kinky Friedman's race for governor down in Texas, which was a lot of fun. We actually ran an independent candidate against Chris Christie and John Corzine in New Jersey in 2009, and we're the people that brought you Alan Grayson. Or as I call him, the Michelle Bachmann of the left. But and there are stories behind all of those, and I think we have most of those commercials. So you never saw Wellstones? Why don't you play a couple of the Wellstone commercials? Can you find it on there? Fast Baseball? Yeah, go for Fast Baseball.
Paul Wellstone, and I'm running for the United States Senate from Minnesota. Unlike my opponent, I don't have $6 million, so I'm going to have to talk fast. This is my wife Sheila and our children.
Paul was a lot louder than that.
This is my house in Northville, where I've lived for 21 years. My son David farms, and I've worked with Minnesota farmers for years. We must stop the poisoning of the air and the land and the water. I'll lead the fight for national health care. I've been a teacher for 24 years. Labor endorsed.
Paul Wellstone won't slow down after he's elected. Vote for Paul Wellstone on November 6th.
Now, I don't want to say that we had to trick Paul into doing that commercial, but we kind of had to trick Paul into doing that commercial. What we did, when we never really showed Paul the script and the storyboard for this because he wouldn't have, nobody was understanding what it was we were trying to do. What was the point of that commercial? Who knows what the point of that commercial was? That's why I love Minnesota audiences, because they actually get things. Anytime I show this to like consultants in Washington, they always say, wow, you did a really good job of cramming all those issues into a 30-second spot. And the whole point behind that was we knew we were going to be outspent. We put this up early, and the jujitsu move there was that anytime you saw a Boschwitz commercial, we had already tagged him as the guy who was trying to buy the election. And that's what that was all about. But Paul didn't really understand that. So what we did on this shoot was we would go to these various settings, like outside a hospital or by a river, and I'd ask Paul to give us 2 minutes on his position on the environment, you know, because he's standing by the Cannon River, or 2 minutes on healthcare outside the hospital. And then right before we broke the camera down to go to the next location, I'd say, now, walk through as fast as you can and look at the camera and just say this, as fast as you can. And to his credit, he didn't ask why until after lunch, at which point we had to show him the storyboard and the script, and he really didn't understand what it was we were trying to do, but he played along for the rest of the shoot. Unfortunately, when we put the commercial together and showed it to them for the first time, Pat Forcia, Paul Wellstone, they all thought it was a joke. And then they said, okay, now show us the real commercial. And we were going, this is a really good commercial. It is a really good commercial. This is the real commercial. And it was very, very, very quiet. In fact, they refused to run the commercial. until Paul was in danger of losing the primary to, I think his name was Jim Nichols, who was the ag commissioner. And Jim Nichols had not, I don't think Jim Nichols had spent $15 on his campaign. He was campaigning from his kitchen table, but Paul was looking like he could lose the primary to Nichols, and finally somebody decided to put this on the air. And Paul was out campaigning on the streets, and you know, everybody thinks of Paul now and what a good speaker he was and all the crowds that he could draw. But man, you know, you had to throw a net over people at that time to try to get them to go talk to Paul on the street. But all of a sudden, the morning after the spot ran for the first time, people were coming up to Paul. He didn't have to go tackle them or something and wrestle them to the ground to get them to listen to him. And the coup de grace was when a guy came up with a $100 check and said, "I saw your commercial on TV last night. Here's $100. Give him hell." And Paul said to somebody, "What commercial did we have on TV last night?" And it was that one. So that commercial was the first time we'd ever done political advertising, and it was to try to see if things that work in commercial advertising can work in political advertising. And I think that did. The other famous spot from that campaign was the Looking for Rudy spot. Do you know if that's on this thing? Oh, that's right. No, it's better if I have it. Which, of course, isn't on this. It's on one of those other reels, though. Maybe we can come back to that. Other questions? Kinky didn't do that many TV spots. What we did for Kinky was a bunch of web videos, mostly cartoon animation. And if you can go to the first one under Webtoons called Save Your Vote for Kinky. Here's the deal. Here's the deal with the two parties. The two parties don't actually want anybody else running for office. So in a lot of these states, they make it extremely difficult for a candidate to get on the ballot even. And in Texas, they had a law where anybody who voted in either party's primary was ineligible to sign a petition to allow an independent candidate to run. In addition, you had to get a certain percentage of the number of people that voted in both the two-party primaries. So the Secretary of State, who was a Republican, they ran for the first time in Texas history a $2 million TV campaign urging people to vote in the primaries. And my favorite part about this is voter turnout in the primaries went down. Meanwhile, we were out there trying to explain to people, here's the deal, you can't vote in the primary, then we need you to sign a petition for us, and by the way, you have to sign that petition within a 45-day period, because that's all the time they give you to do this, and then you vote for us in the election. Now that's a complicated message to get across, especially to Texans, and so we decided to do it with cartoons. And we put together these web animations. And Kinky had a lot of star power on his campaign. I mean, Willie Nelson was with us. The Dixie Chicks were with us. All these, Billy Joe Shaver, all these great Texas singers were with us. So we took advantage of it. There's some in-jokes in this thing, but if you play this first one, and his sidekick is a guy named Little Jewford. Kinky used to have a country western band called Kinky Friedman and the Texas Jew Boys.
Howdy, folks. For me, this campaign for governor is all about giving Texans an independent choice, someone different from the usual politicians and ribbon cutters. But the politicians who are already in office don't make it very easy. Imagine if our modern-day politicians were holed up back at the Alamo.
Men, we have two choices. we can stay on that side of the line and surrender. Or we can show Santa Anna's army what Texans are made of. And hide. Hide?
Couldn't we fight?
Now, David, you know very well that kind of decisive action and independent thinking requires over 45,000 notarized signatures on a properly worded petition circulated within the legally specified number of days.
Man, I really hate that law.
When only Democrats and Republicans dictate the kind of choices you have, you end up with no real choice at all.
Remember the Alamo!
I'd rather not.
Fortunately, the men of the Alamo listened to their hearts and did what was right for Texas. And fortunately, you can fight to give Texas a real independent governor who will change the politics as usual in this state. It won't be easy. Our homegrown campaign won't have the millions and millions of dollars to spend on elections like everybody else in the race. But one thing we do have is a wealth of Texas support. Hit it, Juford.
Bureaucrats and copycats, you've got no choice at all. So save yourself for Kinky and vote for him next fall. We're working hard for Texans, because Texans want a choice. Just save yourself for Kinky, the real independent voice.
So save yourself for Kinky and save yourself for Kinky.
Save your vote for me, how hard could it be?
Save yourself for Kinky.
If you want Texas great again, not always being last, save yourself for Kinky, and tomorrow we'll kick ass.
We need to collect signatures for any candidate. Yes, save yourself for Kinky and save our friggin' state. So save yourself for Kinky, yes, save yourself for Kinky. The status quo has got to go. So save yourself for Kinky.
Remember, folks, register to vote. Sign our petition to get me on the ballot. Then vote for me this fall. Find out how at kinkyfriedman.com.
We'll take our Kinky message across this blessed land. We'll save ourselves for Kinky. And united we will stand.
We can't do worse than these folks. Let Kinky take a shot.
Why should he be governor?
Well, why the hell not?
That was our campaign slogan, why the hell not?
Don't vote in the primary so you can save yourself for Kinky.
Technical difficulties?
Do they still have that regulation?
Yeah.
What's with the astronaut?
Because of Houston, there's a bunch of... Yeah.
I wanted to know why he was going to
I don't know. And there are a bunch of in jokes in there. The woman that keeps popping up that's saying I'm an independent too, that's a woman named Carol Ann Strayhorn. She had $12 million, and she hates Rick Perry, so she was going to run against Rick Perry in the primary. Rick Perry only had a 34% approval rating at the time. So Carol Strayhorn was going to run against Rick Perry, and we were counting on her to run against Rick Perry and do a lot of the negative work that we couldn't afford to do against Rick Perry. But she saw how well we were doing in terms of collecting independent signatures, and she decided to run as an independent and spend her $12 million doing that, which cut into our vote. Between Strayhorn and Kinky, the independent vote was 30%. But it really needed to consolidate if it was going to have a chance to win. Anyway, that's the Kinky Friedman thing. We did 3 or 4 of those webtoons, and I think we did a couple of TV spots, but they weren't quite as funny. There's one under the TV that says Cowboy Way. Why don't you play that one? Everybody was expecting us to do something really funny on TV, and we did this real kind of heartfelt thing, and Texans were surprised.
Folks, when a cowboy shakes your hand, it's the law of the land. Cowboy doesn't talk about education, he teaches. Cowboy doesn't talk about religion, he lives it. The other candidates are spending millions on commercials, going at each other like javelinas in heat. But ask any cowboy, and he'll tell you, money may buy you a fine dog, but only love can make her wag her tail. I'm Kinky Friedman, and that's why I'm running for governor of Texas.
Kinky lives on a ranch that's about an hour and a half west of Austin, but he also has an animal rescue ranch there, which is why we had all these dogs and animals, and people in Texas know that he has this animal rescue ranch. The other curious thing, well, there were about 15 million curious things about that campaign, but there were a couple of film crews following us around all the time because Country Music Television wanted to do a reality show just on the off chance that he might get elected governor. So we always had cameras following us around. And Kinky is an irascible sort to begin with, and he really doesn't want to look on camera like he's listening to Yankees like me tell him how to appeal to Texans. So on the day of the shoot, we had our camera crew, and we had all these other cameras, and Kinky would not take direction. I mean, he would not, if I told him to go left, he'd go right. And it was a really bad shoot. There were a number of people on drugs, and maybe Kinky was one of them. By the end of the shoot, I was ready to be one of them. And I took all the footage and dumped it on this editor's desk in Austin, and I said, I have no idea what to do with this. Here's the script. Here's what you got. Good luck. And he performed a miracle. I mean, he created 2 or 3 spots in that same vein, that same sort of heartfelt vein. And another one, Kinky quotes the Good Shepherd proverb, and you got a Jew from Texas talking about the Good Shepherd. It works in a really strange way. It works, and nobody was expecting that. If we would have had a little more money, we probably could have pulled off a pretty big upset there. What else can I tell you about? All right. All right. Oh, we worked for, yeah, and I'll get to that. In 2006, we also worked for a guy named Christy Myhos, who was a Greek who owned a bunch of convenience stores in Massachusetts, but had made a lot of money. But more importantly, he was a whistleblower on the Big Dig project. I got to spend a semester at Harvard being a teaching fellow at their Institute of Politics, and I got to meet. My favorite guy was this guy, Dave Nyan, who was a longtime reporter for the Boston Globe. And the Big Dig had cost overruns of about, I think it was $17 billion. So it was like one of the biggest industries in Boston for a long, long, long time. And this guy was a whistleblower on it. Anyway, he ran as an independent for governor against the Democrat and the Republican. So if you go to the TV spot that's called Heads Up. Yeah, play that one. This one got us in trouble.
Mr. Engineer, why is the Big Dig $12 billion over budget?
Well, you see...
Hey, how did the Big Dig get $12 billion over budget?
Simply put...
Put an end to politics as usual in Massachusetts. Be independent. Vote Christy Myhos for governor.
Now, first of all, it's Boston, and you might think that Puritanism doesn't exist anymore, but the first thing we got was you can't run that commercial on TV before 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And we're like, why? Well, it's a cartoon, and kids could see that adults are shoving their heads up their asses. And I said, kids already know that. And then there was this big controversy because the Republican candidate was the Secretary of State, the Lieutenant Governor, a woman named Carrie Healy, and she has blonde hair. So they were saying that we were intentionally saying that Carrie Healy was had her head up her ass. And the Democrat was Deval Patrick, who was African American. So, you know, the Republicans were claiming that we were doing this to her, but not doing the same thing to a Democrat. And I explained to them that the company that did the animation was here in Minneapolis. It was a company called RealWorks. And I said, they think every woman is blonde. That's how that happened. It's just what everybody thinks in Minnesota. And believe it or not, we got away with that explanation.
Did you get in trouble with Bechtel?
This is
No.
one of the few times when the Republicans were arguing for more inclusion.
Yeah, I think they were. They were arguing, let's make the Democrat look as stupid as we look. But I think the Democrats controlled the legislature at the time, so the majority of those people the second time around were Democrats. We just didn't identify them. Go ahead and play Jesse the Mind if you want to.
Navy SEAL, union member, volunteer high school football coach, outdoorsman, husband of 23 years, father of 2. A man who will fight to return Minnesota's budget surplus to the taxpayers, who will fight to lower property and income taxes, who does not accept money from special interest groups, and who will work to improve public schools by reducing class sizes.
Now, there are a lot of stories behind that one. The strategic reason we did that commercial was because we knew, and this really seems quaint these days, but Minnesotans were really angry in 1998. When I look back now and I think how angry they were about what they had to be angry about in 1998 compared to today, I'm astounded. But voters were really angry in 1998 because the legislature was split and nobody seemed to be getting anything done. We knew that there were a lot of voters that really wanted to pull the lever for Jesse, but they couldn't quite get past the notion of pulling the lever for a professional wrestler. So everything in there is about things that people generally didn't know. They thought he was a wild man, and he'd been married to the same woman for, I don't know, 30 years or something. They didn't know that he had 2 kids. They didn't know that he was a volunteer high school coach. They didn't know that he was a union member. They didn't know a whole lot of this stuff. So we did that. And the notion came from something Jesse used to say in speeches. He used to say, when I was wrestling, they used to call me Jesse the Body, but now I make my living with my mind, so I'm Jesse the Mind Ventura. So we arrived at the notion of using the thinker to portray that. But here's the other thing. We got money to do TV because, again, the 2 parties were in the way. You know, we had public financing, but nobody... The problem in Minnesota is they give you public financing, but you don't get the money till after the election. So somebody's got to give you a short-term loan to bridge the gap. And the other problem is if you don't get 5% of the vote, you don't get the money. So Democrats and Republicans never have trouble getting the money. Jesse had a big problem getting the money, mostly because first the Republicans thought that Jesse would take votes away from the first the Democrats thought Jesse would take votes away from the Republican, so we were all set with a Democratic bank. And then they decided that he was too close in the polls, so all of a sudden they wouldn't loan us the money. So we didn't get money to run TV spots until, we didn't get any money really till 10 days out from the election. This ad ran only over the final weekend. Now, the other problem is when you're that late in the campaign, you can't take the candidate off the campaign trail for an entire day, which is how long it takes to shoot these commercials. So he has to be out campaigning, even though Jesse really, because he's acted before, he really actually likes hanging around sets. He would have done it all day, but it wasn't a good idea. So we had to make him go out campaigning, which meant we needed somebody other than Jesse for a lot of these shots. So a couple days after the election, I go out to someplace in Minnetonka to give a speech to some Chamber of Commerce or something. And I pull up, and it's early in the morning in the hotel parking lot, and there's all these cameras and the microphones and stuff. And I'm going, man, I wonder, there's a media scrum out there. I wonder who it's for. And I get out of my car, and I start walking there, and they all start charging at me, and I go, oh, this can't be good. And basically, they were all saying that we had perpetrated fraud on the Minnesota public because that wasn't really Jesse Ventura in that commercial. Well, yeah, Jesse Ventura's in that commercial, and he's in a lot of the scenes there. But for the shots where you don't see Jesse's face, that's not Jesse. The term in Hollywood is a body double. It's like a stunt person. So they all start going, whoa, 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 this is a big lie. And we said, wait a minute. We had casting notices up all over the Twin Cities for bodybuilders who would shave their head and go do this. It's not exactly like we were trying to hide this thing. And the part that they didn't use on the evening news was when I said, what's that movie where Sharon Stone does that funny thing with Basic Instinct? I said, have any of you seen Basic Instinct? Do you think you saw Sharon Stone naked? I got news for you. That wasn't Sharon Stone. It's the same thing. So we got past that. And then the other problem with it was we took the spot. Jesse had no problem with the spot. If you watch the spot carefully, it looks like the Rodin figure is wearing workout shorts. Well, actually, we didn't shoot it that way. We shot it intentionally, and the model was wearing shorts, but we shot it, and Jesse was wearing shorts, but we shot it in flesh tone shorts. You know, tribute to Rodin. We're artsy people. And Jesse had no problem with it, but his wife and his mother-in-law really had a problem with it. And I love Terry. I mean, Terry, I think Jesse's wife is just one of my absolute favorite people. But I don't know how much art history she took. So his mother-in-law said, it looks like he's sitting on the toilet. So we had a really hard time getting this commercial approved. It was scheduled to run for the first time on Saturday Night Live, the Saturday night before the election, but I couldn't get it approved. And Dean Barkley, I think some of you might know Dean. Dean's a really good guy. Dean actually took the tape. I'd given up. I mean, Jesse said, it's okay, but you got to convince my wife and my mother-in-law, and then he left. I don't know where he went, but I wish he would have taken me with him. And I spent almost as much time as I spent at the Apple store today trying to convince his wife and his mother-in-law that this is a good thing, and I lost. I didn't win. So I walked out disconsolate. Dean Barkley took a VHS tape of this thing and went door to door in Plymouth and played it for people and came back and said, you can either believe me or you can come with me and we'll go do this again. But everybody thinks this is a fantastic commercial, and you really have to do it. The compromise we ended up doing was going back into the post-production studio and painting on what looks like workout shorts. So he didn't look naked there. But it was a great commercial, and it worked. Also, to tell you how stupid I am, in the editing, which we were doing really, really quickly because we had to get this thing on the air, Jesse had done this wink at the camera, and we put it in at the end, and I just kept saying, I don't understand the wink. Somebody explain the wink to me, and everybody had a different explanation, and none of them were convincing to me, but the fact that everybody thought it was great and they could all read into it, whatever they wanted to read into it, I said, okay, I don't understand why he's winking, but apparently everybody else does, so let's leave it in. And yeah, it works great. I mean, it works fantastic. So I was wrong on that one. What else did we want to look at?
This is your favorite tonight. You tell us.
Well, it's like your kids. You know, they're all favorites. I have 120 favorites on this. Go ahead and play Insanity. This was a knock on Joe Lieberman.
I'm Ned Lamont, and I approve this message.
Didn't see that coming. Gotta stop doing this. Stupid car!
If the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, why in the world would we send Joe Lieberman back to the U.S. Senate?
See, people really do like negative advertising. Here, I know how to make everybody angry. Play number 3.
Grilled tenderloin for fundraiser, $1,000 a plate. Campaign ads filled with half-truths, $10 million. Promises to special interest groups, over $10 billion. Finding out the truth, priceless. There are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there's your voter registration card. Use it. Vote Green Party candidate Ralph Nader for president.
Among the people that we made angry with that was MasterCard, who decided to sue us over this, and it was mostly just a harassment suit. Although, fortunately, we have a clause in our contract that says that the campaign has to defend us if they approve a spot and we run it. And so Ralph calls me up and he says, "Well, I'm having trouble getting a lawyer to defend us on this one." I said, "Ralph, this is a slam dunk. This is First Amendment. You got First Amendment lawyers coming out the wazoo. Just find us a First Amendment lawyer. Boom, slam dunk, this thing's over." And he said, "I'm having real trouble doing that, but I have all these intellectual property lawyers calling me up, and they all want to do it pro bono on the condition that we defend it as legitimate use of intellectual property." And I said, "Well, I don't care what you do, but you got to defend me." So we ended up hiring a group called Fish and Richardson, and they defended it. It became a landmark case in intellectual property law. Basically, the distinction here was that this was parody and not satire. Don't ask me exactly what the distinction is, but satire was not allowed or could be libelous or something, but parody was not. And MasterCard made us produce all these documents and stuff. I mean, that was and it's late in a campaign. It's hard when you're a small business like mine to all of a sudden churn out every email that we've ever had about anything. And then they send out 2 lawyers to depose me. And the Fish and Richardson guy, he's probably not in the room because he's probably drinking and has been drinking since he had to prep me for this deposition. But he's a guy named Mike Kane. He did a great job, but he was really nervous because I just thought this was so asinine that he was convinced I was not going to do what lawyers want you to do, which is just to say, yes, no, I don't know, I don't recall. And they sent these couple of women out from a very high-priced law firm in Manhattan to depose me, and the deposition was going on and on and on. And finally, at one point, they wore me down, and I got tired of saying yes, no, and I don't know. So they asked me, "Don't you think that there's a person out there who could think that Ralph Nader is endorsing MasterCard. This is what lawyers do. Sorry. And I said, I suppose there could be a person out there that would confuse this for an endorsement of Ralph Nader for MasterCard. But I don't think that person should be out walking around unsupervised. And the other good thing we had going for us, it was a Friday afternoon, and it was really cold. It was cold. I mean, cold, cold, cold. And these two women were out here really nicely dressed from Manhattan. And I said to them during the break, there's a 3 o'clock flight back to LaGuardia. If we get this wrapped up in time, otherwise you're here all weekend. And we can pick this up again on Monday if you'd like. Go to the next field and let's see if there's anything good on that. Yeah, play number 9, because you mentioned John Hickenlooper, who's now the governor of Colorado. This is what put him on the map. This is what won the election for him in Denver.
I'm John Hickenlooper, and I'm out to make change in Denver. These parking meters are just one example of what I call the fundamental nonsense of government. The city raised our parking rates, and now shoppers are going elsewhere, business is suffering, and tax revenues are down. After successfully redeveloping Lodo and creating hundreds of jobs, I know I can make positive changes for Denver's economy and solve our water and traffic problems. Now that's the kind of change people can get excited about.
So when the Obama campaign announced that they were having the 2008 Democratic convention in Denver, I said, of course, the mayor is a guy who believes in change. But the basic strategy behind that one was this was the first time he'd ever run for office. He had a group of restaurants and brew pubs in downtown Denver, and they had done something with the parking laws, you know, the famous Denver boot, which is what they put on your car if you park too long at the meters down there. And basically what they had done I think they took away free weekend parking or something. So nobody wanted to come downtown. They didn't want to come downtown to shop. They'd go to the suburbs where the parking was all free. And John called it, whatever we call it in that spot, the institutional nonsense of, fundamental nonsense of government or something. Because you do something, kind of sounds like a good idea, but then you figure out it was a really bad idea. And you probably shouldn't have done it in the first place. Play number 12. We do attack ads, but when we do them with automatic weapons.
This is an AK-47, the rifle of choice for terrorists in Iraq and Afghanistan. This isn't vests left over from the Vietnam War. It's the protection we were given when we deployed to Iraq. This is modern body armor, made for today's weapons. The difference is life or death. Senator George Allen voted against giving our troops this. Now it's time for us to vote against him.
VoteVets is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So we did that for Vote Vets, and they used it against George Allen and 4 or 5 other Republicans that lost in that particular cycle. Let's do a kinder and gentler ad. Let's do that 16 campground. That's an environmental ad.
That ought to hold if the weather turns. Here, you try.
Okay.
Watch your fingers.
Hey, Dad! I got something!
Hold on! Hey, honey, Josh caught something! Hang on to him, son! I'm coming!
What are you going to tell your kids when there's no wilderness left? Help save our open spaces.
Hey, I'm camping here!
Sometimes you just get lucky. I got a chance to meet a guy named Peter Berg, who's an actor. He actually went to McAllister. He's an actor. He was in Chicago Hope and The Last Seduction and a few other things. But then he became a director. He directed Friday Night Lights, and then he became a producer. He's the producer behind the TV series Friday Night Lights, and he directed Hancock and The Mission and a whole bunch of other stuff. Well, Pete had been selected to shoot a high-rise disaster film. It was kind of stupid. It was about like a fire company that robs a high-rise or a skyscraper that's on fire. So it was going to be this big special effects movie, and all the special effects studios, post-production studios in Hollywood, were trying to get on his good side because it would be a big payday for post-production stuff. So the people that did Moulin Rouge and Jurassic Park and all these other special effects things were wooing him at the time we talked him into directing this commercial for us. So we basically got all the special effects free. So that's like a $400,000 commercial that we didn't pay anywhere near $400,000 for. And Pete was friends with Taylor Leone, who was married to David Duchovny, so we got David Duchovny to do the voiceover. Let's do one that didn't work. Boy, I just can't find one. Do number 14, underwater. When I work for Canada, I like to find out what they know how to do.
Underwater. That's where a lot of us are financially, thanks to the Bush administration and greed on Wall Street. But I can do something about it. I'm an expert in economics, not a professional politician. I can help taxpayers like your family and mine recover our investments. Go to wheelinforcongress.com to find out how you can help. Together, we'll be like a breath of fresh air in Congress. I'm Charlie Whelan, and I approve this message.
So when Rahm Emanuel decided to become chief of staff, he had to leave his congressional seat in Chicago, and that opened up a free-for-all because it was a special election. Free-for-alls can be pretty good because it's a short time period, a lot of people in the race, and this guy, Charlie Whelan, happened to be the former Midwest correspondent for The Economist magazine, and also taught at University of Chicago economics. And I thought this was what, just after, right after 2008. So I thought if the Congress could ever use an economist, it sounds like the right time. So you ask your candidates sometimes, you know, what did you do in school, and what do you like? He said he was the captain of his swim team in high school, and I said, oh, so you can hold your breath underwater. How long can you hold your breath underwater? And so that was an analogy to the financial condition we all found ourselves in. There is I think 13 is an Alan Grayson spot. Try case closed.
This is $1 million, more money than most people see in a lifetime. But in Iraq, $9 billion of your tax dollars have gone missing. Enough cash to fill this entire airplane hangar. Enough to pay for health care, dental care, and medicine for everyone in Florida, without raising taxes. For years, I've fought war profiteers cheating you and our troops. Send me to Congress so I can finish the job. I'm Democrat Alan Grayson, and I approve this message.
He's much saner than Michelle.
Yeah. Well, you didn't have to work with them as closely as I did. Alan had done a lot of good work, but that spot is good, but it was really the strategy that won for him, because it's basically a Republican district. The DCCC didn't want him as the candidate. They had already selected the candidate that they wanted, so he had to beat the DCCC selected candidate in the primary and then beat the longtime Republican incumbent in a Republican district. It's basically Orlando in Florida. But Allen had filed a bunch of these lawsuits against defense contractors for basically ripping us off. And it was the perfect storm because you could make the argument to people in Orlando, Florida, that not only were they ripping you off as taxpayers, but they were also endangering the troops. So that's quite a combination. It's a very powerful combination for a Democrat to have. Here's a do number 15, poor coverage. We got universal health care passed in Connecticut. It took a while, but this helped.
It's becoming impossible to ignore. In healthcare, people all over Connecticut are suffering from poor coverage. Rising premiums, increased denials, higher deductibles, and even no coverage at all. But comprehensive reform can help everyone in Connecticut and save taxpayers and businesses hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Join the demand for comprehensive reform at healthcareforeveryone.org so everyone can get the healthcare coverage they need.
What else? I could show some Republican spots, but nobody wants to see those.
We should go maybe another 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay.
And we can either see more videos or we can do question and answer. What do you want to do? Videos or videos? Videos and questions. Videos? I think people want to do the videos.
I don't blame them. Let's see. Go to, there's a spot called Money for Nothing. Might be in the next field. Yeah, 23. Oh, there's a good story behind this.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jasper. I'm collecting to build a telescope on a volcanic peak in Mexico.
The endangered aquaculture off the coast of West Virginia.
We can count on you to subsidize foreign governments who want to move American jobs overseas, yes?
Every home in America pays $21,000 in taxes to fund ridiculous programs like these. If you're tired of the government wasting your money, vote for me, Jack Ryan. That better be the pizza guy. I'm Jack Ryan, and I approve this Republican message.
By the way, that was the first, I think that was the first campaign spot that had to use the I'm so-and-so and I approve this message. Yeah, because we ran that really early in the election cycle of 2004. Jack was a Goldman Sachs banker who had made a bunch of money.
He was 7 and 9's husband.
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually like Jack. He's a smart guy. He was, in my opinion, the least objectionable Republican in a Republican field, but he'd never run for office before. But one of the things, I grew up Catholic in Chicago. I went to Catholic schools for a long time. Jack grew up Catholic, didn't go to Catholic schools, but he was single-handedly, out of his own checkbook, keeping open a South Side all-boys parochial Chicago high school called Hales Franciscan. He just kept it open. And 98% of those students went to college every year. In fact, we had made so many inroads on the south side of Chicago that when Republican Day took place at the Illinois State Fair down in Springfield, we had more than 30 buses of African Americans who wanted to come down there and show their support, which I think is more black people than have ever been at the Chicago State Fair. Certainly on Republican Day, but maybe on any particular day. But the other part of the strategy was, because Jack had money, it's one of the very, 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 very few times we've had a candidate with money. Because Jack had money, I said to him, you know what we should do? We should run, and nobody knows you. What we should do is start running ads in October. of 2003. And he said, it's a 2004 primary. What sense does that make? And I said, yeah, exactly. Because if you think about it, first of all, it's an early primary. It's an early March in Illinois. And if you think about it, who pays attention to political ads kind of at all, except in the fall? So what I was thinking is, if we ran ads in September and October, about mid-November, your mind shifts, it switches off, and you start thinking about the holidays and stuff, and you don't think about politics through December. And I figured every other candidate in the race said, well, really, the campaign starts on January 1st. That's when we'll start doing our ad buys. So I said to Jack, let's make you the #1 candidate by the end of the year, and then let's run a 9-week campaign and see if you can catch us. And we did. Everybody thought we were absolutely nuts to be running political ads in October and September of 2003. But it worked. We were in first place. The other guys couldn't catch us. He'd never run before, and we won. But I had an agreement with Jack that I was only doing his race through the primary. And he said, as it looked like he was going to win during the primary, he said, I know you're not going to do our race in the general. We'd like you to, but I understand. But he said, can you handicap the other side for me? And I said, the rich guy on the other side, this guy named Blair Hall, and he's had like 4 restraining orders filed against him by his wife, who he's been married to 3 times, and they're about to get married again. I think you got a good shot against him. The machine politician, there was a Chicago machine politician, I don't know if it was Madigan or Hines, or it was one of those Irish names. I said, you got a decent shot against that guy. He's in second place because you're going to siphon off some South Side votes that they count on completely. And there was a woman in the race, but she was mired in third place, and I said, you know, she'd do pretty well against you, but she's not going anywhere. She's in third place. I said, there's this guy who's in fourth place, and he would kick your ass. But he's in fourth place, and nobody's actually ever heard of him. He's he's a downstate legislator named, he's a legislator in the legislature downstate named Barack Obama. He's from the South Side, African-American guy. But, you know, he's in fourth place right now. But he would kick your ass if he got to the general. And, well, you know what happened. Barack got to the general, and then this sex scandal happened with Jack. You never want a candidate to come to you late in the campaign and say, can we just talk, you and me, for a second? Because that's never a good thing. Whatever you're gonna hear is not a good thing. And Jack was single. He was really good looking. Every time women would see him, they'd just go, well, why don't you just put him on camera and not have him say anything, and maybe take his shirt off, and he'll get all the votes. But I worried, because Jack was a really good-looking guy, and he wasn't married, and I mean, I'm not married either, but I'm not a good-looking guy. So I thought, you know, I might find out something that would not be the best thing for a Republican candidate in a Republican primary. As it turns out, because this Blair Hall guy's divorce records got opened up, which is how people figured out that his wife had filed a restraining order against him every time they'd been married. The Chicago Sun-Times made the same argument to the divorce records of Jack and his wife, which were sealed. And Jack's wife was Jerry Ryan. She was 6 of 9, 7 of 9 on Star Trek, and she was also the blonde teacher in Boston Public. And she dated Frasier on the Frasier Show a couple times. So she was really good looking, and she was a Hollywood actress, and they got divorced, and they decided to seal the divorce records because they have a disabled son who was very young at the time that they were getting divorced. So the Sun-Times wins, and the judge opens these records, and there's a lot of salacious stuff in there about Jack and his wife at sex clubs in Paris. So after I finished the campaign, I was actually driving to Montana to give a speech to the Montana Newspaper Association. My phone rings, and Jack says, "Oh, I guess you've seen what's going on." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Tell me, really, is there any way I can survive this?" And I said, and he gave me a couple rationalizations that I did not think would work. And I said, "Yeah, there's one thing that can save you. If Jerry's willing to come back, you know, from L.A., stand with you at a press conference, basically the message has to be, Jack's a good man. A lot of things are said when people disagree. A lot of things are said in divorce proceedings because of the lawyers. We really wanted this sealed for the benefit of our son, and what's important here is how this is going to affect our son, not us." And I said, "Jack, would she do this?" And there's this long silence. And he says, "Not in a million years." And I said, "Well, you're dead." And that's the story behind that one. All right. What else? Yes, sir.
So can you compare Illinois to Minnesota as far as working political campaigns? I mean, I've lived in both Illinois and Minnesota. I think they're both incredibly fucked up states in politics, but in very different ways.
Yeah, I think the question was about comparing Minnesota and Illinois. There's certain states that, at least in my opinion, are long-term democratic states with really kind of extraordinary, sometimes borderline legal politics. I don't think that's Minnesota. I think things are pretty above board here and sometimes pretty boring. But they're always really interesting in Massachusetts, Illinois, man, Louisiana. Louisiana is really interesting. So I don't think, you know, I can't really compare the two, except I think the Democratic machine is more established, at least still in the city of Chicago, than the DFL party is in Minnesota. The DFL party, I think, is on the downswing. The Democratic Party in Illinois is still probably okay, and in Chicago it's still pretty strong. Sir? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and this kind of goes to your question. The question was about the Petters Ponzi scheme and the fact that we had done some print ads about some things that were going on with the court case there. The creditors group that wanted to know what the hell was going on up in Minnesota felt like they were getting a raw deal. And they came to us because they basically said there's nobody else up here who would take this on as a public relations or an advertising thing, because they would be afraid of pissing off important people in Minnesota. And I said, well, we've already done that, so we've got really nothing to lose there. But the more, really, when you looked into it on its merits, it seemed awfully odd. And there was a professor, a law professor at the university. There was an investigative reporter from Chicago, a guy named Jim Mariner, who was doing this. And the more I talked to those people, the more they were saying, this is extraordinary. This is really weird if you know anything about bankruptcy law. And the creditors group just felt like they were getting homered. Homered like a home team. You know, you go on the road and the umpires are against you and everybody else. And there were just some really strange connections there. I don't know how many paid attention to the Madoff case. By the way, the Petters case is the biggest Ponzi scheme in the country for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then Madoff was exposed. But if you look at the Madoff case, there's and I'm not good at this, I need a lawyer. There's a trustee and there's somebody that represents the creditors, and there's somebody that represents the bankrupt corporation. And somehow Doug Kelly managed to be all 3 of these people in Minnesota. And we're going, wait a minute, this is just kind of strange. And as it turned out, Doug Kelly was a law school friend of the judge on the case. And just the more we looked into it, the stinkier it looked. So we said, all we're doing is asking questions that we thought the media should have been asking in the first place. But, you know the state of the media these days. There's no money, so there's no reporters, so there's no money to do investigations. There's no money to cover anything. There's no money to pay attention to anything. So we were just basically out there asking questions that never really came, nobody had any answers for. I mean, how does the bankruptcy trustee, and if you really looked into it, the bankruptcy trustee had most of the law firms in Minnesota on the payroll, including his own law firm and his partner in the law firms. It was just, and I can't really explain it. It took us a 16-part series in the Star Tribune to even try to explain it. This guy, Jim Mariner, this investigative reporter, is writing a book about it. There was a documentary done on it called The Second Fraud. It's a really, really complex case. The basic gist of it was Petters actually had one business that was legit, and that business had real assets, like Polaroid. I'm in the ad business. When we did a study for Mall of America about 10 years ago on the value of brands, because we wanted to gauge Mall of America's brand value, Polaroid was in the top 10. So the brand itself should have been worth well in excess of $100 million, maybe more. But the people who ended up controlling, the trustees sold it to a group for like $41 million. And you're going, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I don't know anything, but I could find somebody to pay more than $41 million for Polaroid. So there was just all this stuff that did not make sense in this. And the creditors group was saying there were legitimate assets. We had, what do you call them, liens? They had interest in those assets, and Kelly was taking the assets from the legitimate business and trying to use it because there wasn't any money on the side where the people really got scammed. So he was trying to take some of that money and pump it into this thing. And I don't know much about high finance or bankruptcy law, but I know when something smells bad, and that one smelled bad. I would if I could remember it. Is it The Second Fraud? Oh yeah, stopthepetterscam.com. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. If you go on a website, it's if any of you seen The Wire, the TV show The Wire, it's kind of like that.
He accused his opponent of being Taliban Dan, and it seemed like he was sort of coming unrailed. Did you play a role in the 2010 election?
Not officially. The question is about Alan Grayson and his 2010 campaign, and that he somehow, what was your word, came unrailed? Yeah. He referred to his opponent as Taliban Dan. We did not work officially for Alan. Alan's a very smart guy, and he's a very good lawyer, but we have a thing in our contract called a victory bonus, and he wouldn't pay the victory bonus. And I said, I can see where some things might be bones of contention, but I don't see how this one is. So we had to chase him down. We actually had to serve him in the Capitol to get paid. And Alan's campaign was getting a lot of flack for not working with us, but I didn't want to deal with the guy. You know, you don't pay your bills. So the settlement was that we would shoot some commercials for him for his 2000 campaign, and he would pay us more money than the money that he owed us for the thing, and then he could say, well, you know, Northwoods is doing some work for us. But in reality, all we did was send out a couple camera crews. I never had anything to do with Alan in the 2010 race. I would like to think that he wouldn't have said that if I did, but I'm not sure that that would be an accurate statement.
I'd like to follow up on that. Grayson now is running to try to reclaim this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any involvement with that? Do you have any insight into handicapping his chances of winning?
Well, he's running again. His chances are not good. I mean, it's just the makeup of the district. It was a remarkable thing that he won in the first place because, again, he had to knock off the DCCC candidate, and he had to win in a Republican district. And 2008 was a hell of a lot different year from 2010. So I don't know. I mean, maybe if Obama has coattails, but who thinks Obama's going to have a lot of coattails this time around? So I don't see it. I think what Alan needed to do, you know, Paul Wellstone made some pretty big mistakes when he first went to Washington, but he learned within the first few months what Franken's been doing and what Hillary Clinton did when she went to the Senate. You shut the hell up and you pay attention to your job, you learn the ropes a little bit, and then you can start speaking out. But, you know, Grayson didn't do that, and he said some fairly inflammatory things. To a lot of people, they were correct things, but they were fairly inflammatory things. And if you were going to counsel him on getting reelected, which you have to do every 2 years as a member of the House, you might think twice about saying those particular things.
We're going to take just this one more, and then regrettably we have to wrap it up.
Minnesota is undergoing some slow but steady demographic change, and the Latino community is growing and other immigrant communities are growing. How can the DFL address that in statewide races or perhaps Obama's re-election campaign effectively coming up?
Oh, Bill, you're going to have to sort of rephrase
Right. The question was about changing demographics in Minnesota, preponderance or big growth of Hispanic voters. What can the DFL do? And honestly, I don't have the slightest idea. I mean, I'm not that kind of a strategist. I think if I know the type of people we're trying to talk to in any given political campaign, I can do a decent job of making arguments to those audiences and trying to persuade them in a creative way. But I don't know. I mean, quite frankly, my belief is that I don't think if you're any minority, you should be a member of either party. I mean, I don't think if you're a woman, you should be a member of either party because here's what happens with the parties. They take you for granted. I mean, what I say to African-American voters is, what have the Democrats done for you since 1964, I think? But they totally mark you down in their column. They don't think they have to do much. You know, maybe say a few things, give you a little walking around money or something like that. But they don't listen to you anymore. I mean, they actually don't listen to you anymore. And I guess they figure, what the hell are you going to do about it? I mean, where are you going to go? 12% of the people are in favor of the job Congress is doing. You know, I'm kind of in favor of blowing the whole thing up and starting over. Somebody sent me an email, maybe some of you got it the other day, from Warren Buffett, who said, I know how to solve the budget deficit immediately. No problem. You just say that any time a session of Congress ends and there's a budget deficit, none of the incumbents can stand for re-election. That would work. I mean, that would work on a whole lot of levels. Because the most important thing to any politician is getting reelected. I mean, we would like to think something different, but the reality is that. So I'm not much of a DFLer. I think the DFL is really... I moved here in 1980 from Chicago, and I think it's just been a long downward slide for the DFL. I haven't... It started up here, and it's way down here, and if you want me to try to explain how they can get back up here, I have no idea.
One more.
Come on, just wait. How about back there? Yes. Here's what I think is the problem with Occupy Wall Street. And I think what they're doing is pretty amazing because I've been talking to some... It's kind of like when we did Lamont's race. No candidate wanted to get near the Iraq War because they didn't know what was going to happen. So Ned was really the first candidate to come out and say, you know, I'm against the Iraq War, period. No doubt about it. And it worked pretty well. I think there's a lot of fascination, particularly on the left, with the Occupy Wall Street people. But what they're really doing, I don't see it as being left as much as I see it as a populist uprising, which I'm definitely in favor of. And I think what's missing there is that if you ask any of the demonstrators, okay, you're protesting, what are you protesting? It starts to break down because they can't really articulate it. But there is something out there called a financial transaction tax. It's a first step in the right direction, you know? And I think that's the... Right now, Occupy Wall Street is a problem in search of a solution. And they don't really have any solution that they can articulate. The idea behind a financial transaction tax is that when these huge deals are done on Wall Street, these mergers and acquisitions, these big, huge financial shifts in trading, selling one thing to another, yeah, nobody pays any tax on that. Now, we're lucky here in Minnesota. We don't pay sales tax on food and on clothing. But in most states, you pay sales tax on everything. And we pay sales tax on most things. These guys don't pay sales tax on any of that. These are big, big, big deals. I mean, if it was a 1%, 2%, 3% tax, that's a lot of money we're talking about. So it's the first step, I think, in the right direction, and that's really what they should be doing, not taxing those of you who sit at your computer and day trade all day, but these big, big shifts of capital that take place, I think they ought to be taxed. Why should they be taxed at a lower rate or at some type of capital gains tax after the fact rather than being taxed on the transaction itself? Yeah, I would tell, whether it was a candidate or an organization, I would tell them to link the two together. Because right now, in most people's minds, it's just a bunch of, and I grew up in Chicago in 1968, so I'm very familiar with, you know, it's just a bunch of people sitting in and demonstrating, but you don't know what they're demonstrating against and you don't know what they want. And actually, if you ask the Occupy Wall Street people, some people have said it's like the Tea Party, because if you ask them, they give you all sorts of different answers. Well, I'm in favor of the environment. I'm in favor of better health care. I'm in favor of this. I'm in favor of lower taxes. You know, it's hard to get a synthesized solution for this, but I think that would be the first step. So I would tell a candidate, I would tell an organization, start there by linking these two things together, and let's see what else we can do. We want our money back.
All right. I promised Larry the last one. That is the last one.
There's situations where a negative ad works better than a positive ad. Could you explain what the difference is? What's the upshot of either one?
Well, I actually don't think negative ads work. I think what negative ads are intended to do, I wrote a book. It's called Run the Other Way. I brought one copy of it, and there's some other stuff. But one of the things that it exposes, you can get a lot cheaper on Amazon than I'd sell it to you for. One of the things that is exposed in the book is that negative advertising is intentionally used to hold down voter turnout. That's really what it's used for. The biggest lie in politics is either party, any candidate telling you, you got to go out there and vote. You're an American, you need to exercise your right to vote. They don't believe that for one single second. If voter turnout was 3 people, they'd be really happy as long as they knew that 2 of those people were going to vote their way. And that's the absolute truth. So I think negative advertising is often used to hold down any swing vote, to hold down any vote that neither side knows where it would go. They would rather have that vote stay home than show up and vote. And frankly, it works with independent voters, because if both sides go negative, what a lot of independent voters go is, what they say is, pox on both your parties. I'm not going to encourage this. I'm not going to vote for either one of these people because I can't stand either one of them. Which is, I was with Nader in D.C. a few weeks ago, and he was trying to explain to me the wisdom behind none of the above. And I just walked away thinking, this doesn't make any sense at all. And now I'm starting to think it really does make some sense. I mean, if you could actually punch a none of the above, and then you'd have to hold new elections, which would be expensive. But if no incumbent could run after the none of the above, that'd be pretty interesting. Or actually no candidate could run from that was in the previous election. That could be pretty interesting. Well, you really need to buy my book, because any Democrat that thinks that Al Gore lost the election because of Ralph Nader is benighted. I mean, absolutely benighted. Pat Buchanan got more Democratic votes in Florida than Ralph did. And we did have this ongoing argument in the campaign. I said, I want to take the wasted vote argument. I want to take you to New York, Texas, California, all the places where the other candidates aren't campaigning. And I want you to say, in Texas, a vote for Al Gore is a wasted vote. Because our goal was not to win the presidency. Our goal in that campaign was to get 5% of the popular vote, which would have qualified the Green Party for ballot access for the next 4 years. So that was the goal. The goal was never to win the presidency in that particular race. But Ralph didn't want to do that because the press was following around the other candidates. So you did that. But you don't need to ask me. You can ask Bill Clinton, who lost that race. And Bill Clinton will tell you Al Gore ran the most amazingly inept race. I thought Bob Dole's 1996 presidential campaign was the absolute worst campaign I could even imagine. But Al Gore losing to George W. Bush after 8 years of record prosperity, after balancing the budget, are you out of your mind? And I could go on forever about the Gore campaign. Oh, count every vote. They didn't want to count every vote in Florida. If they counted every vote, they would have won. But what they wanted to do was just count selected counties. Well, the Supreme Court wouldn't have mattered if they actually counted every vote. But the Gore campaign didn't want to count every vote.
No, that is a false claim.
No, it's not.
Bottom line is, under Florida law, you have to individually appeal by county. They pick the ones most likely.
And on that note, he can be your next speaker. But he's wrong.
All right, we're going to stop there. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Bill Hillsman, for a very, very interesting presentation. Bill has to get on an airplane.